It started as nothing more than a faint whisper in the back of my mind, a subtle unease that I tried to dismiss as exhaustion. I had been working late shifts all week, barely sleeping, barely eating, and I thought maybe my nerves were simply frayed. But that night, as I walked into my apartment, the quiet felt wrong. Too still, too heavy, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I tossed my keys onto the counter and tried to shake it off. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, steady and low, but instead of comforting me, it seemed to highlight the absence of anything else. I glanced toward the hallway, the shadows stretching long and uneven from the dim light in the living room. My heart gave a slow, deliberate thump in my chest. I told myself I was being silly. I even laughed a little, though it sounded too loud in the silence. I kicked off my shoes, the echo of them hitting the floor lingering longer than it should have. The hallway to my bedroom felt darker than usual, and I caught myself hesitating before turning on the light. My fingers fumbled with the switch, as if part of me was afraid of what I might see when the shadows lifted. The light came on, and everything looked normal. My bed was unmade, my nightstand cluttered with a half-empty glass of water, my laundry spilling from the hamper. But even with everything in its place, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was just off. My gaze kept drifting to the bathroom door, slightly ajar, a thin sliver of blackness between the frame and the wall. I told myself I had probably left it like that. Still, I walked over and pushed it shut, listening to the click of the latch as if sealing away the discomfort building inside me. But then, as I turned away, I thought I heard something, so faint I almost missed it. A shift. A scrape. The kind of sound you don't really hear as much as you feel, deep in your chest. I froze. My breathing slowed until I could hear my own pulse. The sound didn't come again, but the weight of it stayed, crawling over my skin like invisible fingertips. I tried to tell myself that it was nothing, maybe a pipe settling, or the wind against the building, but the logical part of my brain was already losing ground. Something was different tonight. Something was watching, even if I couldn't yet see it. If you want, I can now continue with the next part, strange noises behind the door, in the same style so it flows like a full horror story. I was halfway through brushing my hair when I heard it, soft at first, almost like the faint creak of wood. I paused, the brush caught in my hair, and listened. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of the apartment again. I shook my head and told myself I was imagining things. But as soon as I raised the brush again, it came back. A slow, deliberate sound. Not the sharp groan of a settling floorboard, but something more, controlled. Like weight shifting carefully, one step at a time. My eyes darted to the bathroom door. It was shut, just as I'd left it, but now it felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain, like it was holding something back. I set the brush down and moved closer. My bare feet made no sound against the carpet, and I found myself holding my breath as if I didn't want to alert whatever might be on the other side. The noises stopped again, and for a moment, I wondered if my mind was simply playing tricks on me. I leaned in, pressing my ear to the wood. That's when I heard it. An unmistakable sound this time. A faint rustle, like fabric brushing against the wall. My stomach twisted. I stepped back quickly, my pulse thundering in my ears. Someone was in there. I didn't know how, or when, but I could feel it in my bones. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my hands trembling. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but the thought of speaking out loud terrified me. What if whoever was inside heard me? What if they decided to come out? My thumb hovered over the screen, but then a new sound came from behind the door, slow breathing. It wasn't my breathing. It was deeper, heavier, and steady, like the person on the other side wasn't trying to hide it anymore. My skin prickled, and I could feel my body urging me to run, to get out of the apartment right now. But my legs wouldn't move. I was locked there, staring at the door, imagining what kind of eyes might be watching me from just beyond it. Then, suddenly, there was a soft tap. Just one. Light, almost playful, like a finger gently touching the other side of the wood. I bit down on a scream, clamping my hand over my mouth. The breathing grew louder. And I knew, without a shred of doubt, that whoever was in there was waiting for me to make the next move. If you'd like, I can now continue with a shadow in the steam so it builds the tension toward the reveal. The next morning, I convinced myself I had overreacted. Maybe it was the pipes. Maybe it was a dream I'd somehow convinced myself was real. But the unease never fully left me, it clung to me like a second skin. I told myself a hot shower might help clear my head. Steam filled the bathroom quickly, fogging the mirror and softening the edges of the room. The sound of water crashing against the tile was loud, almost drowning out my thoughts. Almost. I kept glancing at the curtain, half expecting to see it move on its own. I tried to focus on the comfort of the heat against my skin, the way it loosened the knot in my shoulders. But that's when I noticed it, something was different about the steam. It swirled oddly, drifting toward one corner of the shower as though pulled by an invisible current. My gaze followed it, and my stomach dropped. There was a shadow. It was faint at first, distorted by the curtain, but it was there, tall, unmoving. I blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of it, but the outline didn't disappear. My heart began pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The shape was wrong. It wasn't a towel hanging on the rack, it wasn't the shelf or the shower caddy, it was someone. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I watched through the thin veil of steam as the shadow shifted slightly, tilting as though a head had turned toward me. My skin turned cold despite the heat of the water. Every instinct screamed at me to pull the curtain back, to confront whatever was there. But another part of me, the part that wanted to survive, told me to stay still. The longer I watched, the more I became certain that whoever it was wasn't moving closer because they were already exactly where they wanted to be. The shadow lingered, almost patient, and then, just as I started to think I might be imagining it, it stepped back. Not gone. Just out of sight. I yanked the curtain open, the rush of cooler air mixing with the steam. The bathroom was empty. But the mirror. Through the fading condensation, I could see a faint handprint smeared across the glass, far too high to be mine. If you want, I can follow this with face to face with terror, keeping the tension sharp and the POV consistent. I don't know why I didn't run. Maybe I thought if I stayed still, if I kept quiet, whatever was happening would just stop. But that handprint on the mirror told me the truth, someone had been here. Someone close enough to touch the glass while I stood only feet away. I wrapped myself in a towel, every nerve in my body lit with panic. My eyes darted around the bathroom, then the bedroom, searching for any sign of movement. Everything looked exactly as it should, but I could feel it, like the air had weight, pressing in on me. I grabbed my phone, thinking I would call the police, but before I could dial, I heard it. A footstep. Slow. Heavy. From the hallway. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever it was wasn't trying to hide anymore. I turned toward the doorway, and that's when I saw him. He stood in the shadow of the hall, tall and thin, his clothes dark and damp like he'd just come in from the rain, but it hadn't been raining. I couldn't see his face clearly. It was hidden beneath the shadow of a hood. But I could feel his eyes on me, fixed, unblinking. My body wanted to run, but my legs felt like they'd turned to stone. We just stared at each other, neither moving, the silence between us stretching unbearably. Then he took one slow step forward. That broke me. I stumbled backward, knocking into the nightstand and sending a lamp crashing to the floor. The sound shattered the stillness, but he didn't flinch. He just kept walking toward me, one deliberate step after another, like he knew I had nowhere to go. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, coming out as a strangled gasp. My hands fumbled for anything I could use, finally grabbing the broken base of the lamp. I held it out between us, my grip shaking so hard I could barely keep hold. He stopped. For a long, agonizing moment, we just stared at each other again. Then, slowly, the corners of his mouth curved upward in a smile that made my blood run cold. Without a word, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the hallway. But I knew, deep in my bones, that this wasn't over. He wasn't gone. He was just letting me know he could come back anytime he wanted. And that terrified me more than anything. I can now finish with the chilling truth revealed to complete the story's climax. Do you want me to write it? I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floor, every groan of the pipes had me on edge. I kept the lamp on, sitting on the bed with my back to the wall, my eyes fixed on the hallway. I thought about calling the police again, but what would I even tell them? That a stranger had been in my apartment and then just walked away? There was no forced entry, no evidence, except for that faint handprint on the mirror. By morning, exhaustion hit me hard, but fear kept me moving. I checked every lock, every window, searching for some way he might have gotten in. That's when I noticed it, the small vent high on the bathroom wall. I had seen it before, but never thought much about it. Today, I dragged a chair over and climbed up to take a closer look. It was loose. With trembling fingers, I pulled the metal grate aside, and my stomach turned to ice. Inside, behind the vent, was an empty space, large enough for someone to crawl through. My heart pounded as I reached in, feeling the cold metal frame. My hand brushed against something soft. I pulled it out. A piece of fabric. Black. Damp. The smell of mildew clung to it, mixed with something metallic, like rust or blood. I backed away, my knees shaking. That's when I saw it. Inside the vent, deeper in the shadows, something caught the light. I leaned forward, against every instinct, and realized it was a small camera lens, pointing directly toward the shower. My breath caught. He hadn't just been here last night, he had been here before. Watching. Waiting. Recording. I dropped the fabric and stumbled back, my mind spinning. How long had he been in the walls? How many nights had I slept while he was only inches away? And why had he shown himself last night? A faint sound drifted from the vent, then, a soft, steady breath. I didn't look again. I grabbed my phone, my bag, my keys, and I ran. I didn't care if I left the door wide open behind me. I didn't care where I ended up. I just knew I could never go back. Even now, days later, I can still feel his eyes on me whenever I close mine. And deep down, I know he's still watching. Somewhere. If you want, I can now compile all 5 parts into a single, seamless horror short story for maximum impact.